The stars looked different from this far out. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Wanderer and watched the endless darkness beyond the viewport. They had traveled farther than any human had ever gone before. 6 months of flying through empty space, and finally they had found something. The ship's sensors picked up the signal 3 days ago. It was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, and clearly not human. Jake's heart had been racing ever since. This was it, first contact with alien life. Everything humanity had dreamed about for centuries was about to happen. Amy Chen sat at the pilot's station, her hands steady on the controls. She had flown everything from atmospheric jets to orbital shuttles, but nothing compared to this moment. Behind her, Dr. Peter Hayes was checking his scientific equipment for the 100th time. The tall man with graying hair had spent his entire career preparing for this day. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood near the door, his hand never far from his sidearm. The security officer didn't trust easily, and he trusted alien signals even less. Linda Grant worked at the communications station, trying to decode the patterns in the signal. She had been a linguist before joining the space program, and now her skills would be tested like never before. The signal grew stronger as they approached. Then the Wanderer's sensors detected ships, dozens of them. Each one was massive, easily 3 times the size of their vessel. Jake felt his mouth go dry. If these aliens were hostile, humanity wouldn't stand a chance. A voice crackled through the speakers. It was being translated by the ship's computer, but the tone was clear. Cold, superior, amused. Unknown vessel, you have entered the space of the Kralth Empire. Identify yourself or be destroyed. Linda quickly sent back their prepared greeting. This is the human vessel Wanderer. We come in peace, seeking friendship and knowledge. There was a long pause. Then something that might have been laughter came through the speakers. Human, we do not know this word. Transmit your biological data. Dr. Hayes looked at Jake, who nodded. They had discussed this possibility. Peter sent a complete scan of human biology, everything from DNA structure to skeletal composition. It seemed harmless enough. The response took 10 minutes. When it came, everything changed. Biological classification complete. Species designation Class 7 prey organism. You are cleared to dock. Ambassador Zethrak will meet with you. This is a courtesy extended to all new prey species. The bridge went silent. Amy turned in her seat, her face pale. Did they just call us prey? Marcus moved closer to the viewport, staring at the alien ships. This is bad. This is really bad. Jake tried to keep his voice steady. We came here to make contact. We're going to see this through. Peter, what do you think they mean by Class 7? The scientist pulled up the data they had sent. It must be some kind of ranking system. They analyzed our biology and categorized us as prey animals, probably based on our physical characteristics. But we're not prey, Amy said. We're humans. We're at the top of Earth's food chain. On Earth, Marcus said quietly. We're not on Earth anymore. Jake made the decision. We dock, we meet with this ambassador. But everyone stays alert. If this goes wrong, we leave immediately. The Wanderer moved toward the largest alien ship. As they got closer, Jake could see the details of its hull. Weapons, lots of weapons. This wasn't a peaceful exploration vessel. This was a warship. The docking process was smooth. Too smooth. The aliens had done this many times before. As Jake led his crew down the ramp, he got his first look at the Kralth. They were huge. The smallest one stood at least 10 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in dark scales that looked like natural armor. Their faces were reptilian, with rows of sharp teeth visible even when their mouths were closed. Yellow eyes watched the humans with an expression that Jake recognized from nature documentaries. It was the look a cat gave a mouse. Ambassador Zethrak stepped forward. He was even bigger than the others, maybe 12 feet tall. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. Welcome, humans. I am Ambassador Zethrak of the Vrak species, senior diplomats of the Kralth Empire. We have encountered many new species in our expansion across the galaxy. It is always interesting to meet another prey race. Jake stepped forward, trying not to show his fear. Ambassador, I'm Captain Jake Morrison. We're explorers from Earth, we're not prey. We're an intelligent species seeking peaceful contact. Zethrak's mouth opened in what might have been a smile. More teeth became visible. Intelligence and prey status are not mutually exclusive, Captain. Many prey species possess intelligence. It does not change what they are. Dr. Hayes moved beside Jake. How do you determine if a species is prey? The ambassador gestured to a screen on the wall. Human anatomy appeared, broken down into detailed scans. Your biology tells us everything. Forward-facing eyes, designed for limited awareness of surroundings. Weak bone structure easily broken. Minimal natural weapons. Slow running speed compared to true predators. Your bodies are designed to be eaten, not to eat. That's not true, Amy said, her voice sharp. Humans are predators. We hunt. We've always hunted. Zethrak looked at her with something like pity. You hunt prey smaller and weaker than yourselves, using tools to compensate for your physical inadequacy. True predators need no tools. We are born with weapons. He extended his hand, and claws longer than human fingers slid out from the tips. Marcus stepped forward, but Jake held him back. The security officer was tense, ready to fight. But fighting here would be suicide. What does this classification mean for us? Jake asked. The Krauth Empire spans 2,000 star systems, Zethrak said. We have encountered 147 intelligent species. Of those, 93 were prey species. All have been integrated into our empire. Some serve as laborers, some as food stock. The useful ones survive, the others do not. The words hit like a physical blow. Jake felt his crew tense around him. This wasn't first contact. This was a death sentence. You're telling us we have to submit to slavery or be exterminated. Those are harsh words, the ambassador said. We prefer to think of it as finding one's place in the natural order. Predators rule, prey serve. This is how the galaxy has always worked. And if we refuse? Zethrak's expression didn't change. No prey species has ever successfully refused. Some tried to fight. They no longer exist. We are giving you a choice because you are newly discovered. You have 30 of your Earth days to prepare your world for integration. Use this time to convince your people to accept their role. Resistance will result in your species being reclassified from labor stock to food stock. The meeting ended shortly after. The humans were escorted back to their ship in silence. As soon as the airlock sealed, Amy turned to Jake. We can't let this happen. We can't just surrender Earth to these things. We won't, Jake said. He looked at Peter. You said something earlier about our biology. What did you mean? The scientist's eyes were distant, thinking. They're wrong. They looked at our bodies and saw weakness, but they didn't understand what they were seeing. Explain. Humans aren't ambush predators like cats. We're not pack hunters like wolves. We're persistence predators. We evolved to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're not fast, but we never stop. We're not strong, but we can go forever. They looked at us and saw prey because they don't understand what we really are. Marcus smiled grimly. So what are we? We're the thing that doesn't stop chasing you, ever. Jake moved to the captain's chair. Set course for Earth, maximum speed. We have 30 days to prepare for a war, and we're going to need every single one of them. As the Wanderer pulled away from the Krauth fleet, Jake looked back at the massive warships. They had called humanity prey. They had made the biggest mistake of their very long existence. Prey runs. Prey hides. Prey gives up. Humans do none of those things. The journey home would take 3 weeks. Jake spent every moment of it planning. They had been classified as prey, but they were going to teach the galaxy a new lesson. When you corner prey that refuses to run, when you threaten prey that refuses to hide, when you challenge prey that refuses to quit, you don't get submission. You get a fight you're not prepared for. The Wanderer reached Earth orbit on the 19th day. Jake Morrison hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night during the entire journey. Every moment was spent analyzing the data they had gathered on the Krauth, looking for weaknesses, searching for hope. President Helen Carter was waiting for them at the orbital station. She was a tall woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many crises, but nothing like this. Nothing could have prepared humanity for this. The emergency meeting included every major world leader. Jake stood before them in the council chamber, the weight of 7 billion lives pressing down on his shoulders. He told them everything. The Krauth Empire, the classification, the ultimatum. When he finished, the room erupted. Some leaders demanded immediate military action. Others argued for diplomacy. A few suggested surrender, arguing that survival as slaves was better than extinction. President Carter let them argue for 10 minutes. Then she slammed her hand on the table and the room went silent. We have 11 days left, she said. 11 days to prepare for the survival of our species. We're not surrendering. We're not becoming slaves. And we're not going to let some reptiles from space tell us what we are. She looked at Jake. Captain Morrison, you said your scientist had a theory. Explain it. Jake nodded to Peter Hayes, who stood and activated a holographic display. Images of human anatomy appeared, the same ones the Krauth had analyzed. The Krauth looked at our bodies and saw weakness, Peter said. But they fundamentally misunderstood human evolution. Yes, we have forward-facing eyes. Not for limited awareness, but for depth perception needed in pursuit hunting. Yes, we have relatively weak muscles compared to great apes, because we evolved to prioritize endurance over strength. He brought up images of early humans chasing prey across African plains. Our ancestors didn't kill mammoths with strength. They chased them until the mammoths collapsed from heat exhaustion. We evolved to sweat, to regulate our temperature, to keep moving when every other animal had to stop. We're not built for a quick kill. We're built to never stop. General Chris Bennett leaned forward. He was a career military man, scarred from conflicts across Earth. How does this help us fight warships? Because war isn't just about weapons, Peter said. It's about will. The Krauth are ambush predators. They're built for short, overwhelming attacks. They expect prey to run or submit quickly. They've never faced prey that fights back indefinitely. President Carter stood. Then that's what we give them. A fight that never ends. General Bennett, you have full authority to mobilize every military force on Earth. We're not preparing for a battle. We're preparing for a war of attrition. The next 11 days transformed Earth. Every weapons factory ran 24 hours a day. Orbital shipyards that had been building exploration vessels switched to military production. It wasn't enough time to build a fleet that could match the Krauth, but they could build something unexpected. Sophie Blake led the engineering effort. She was young, barely 30, but she had designed the Wanderer's engines. Now she had a different project. The military wanted bigger guns, stronger armor. Sophie gave them something else. We can't beat them in a direct fight, she told General Bennett. So we don't fight direct. We build ships that can take a beating and keep moving. We build ships that can repair themselves. We build ships that never have to stop. She called them endurance-class vessels. They were smaller than Krauth warships, faster, and built with redundant systems. Every critical component had 3 backups. The hull could seal breaches automatically. The engines could run on multiple fuel types. They weren't pretty, and they weren't powerful. But they would not stop. Colonel Ryan Foster worked on tactics. He was a thin man with sharp eyes and a mind that saw patterns everywhere. He spent days studying every piece of data on the Krauth. They fight like lions, he told his staff. Overwhelming force, quick kills, move on to the next target. They expect submission or death. They don't have protocols for enemies that refuse both options. He developed a new combat doctrine. Hit-and-run attacks. Never stand and fight when you can retreat and regroup. Make every battle last as long as possible. Tire them out. Frustrate them. Make them chase you until their crews are exhausted and their supplies run low. Dr. Nicole Sanders joined the effort from an unexpected angle. She was a psychologist who specialized in predator behavior. The military brought her in to analyze the Krauth mindset. They're apex predators, she explained in a briefing. They've been at the top of the food chain so long they can't imagine anything challenging them. This makes them arrogant, but it also makes them vulnerable. If prey fights back effectively, it creates cognitive dissonance. Their instincts say prey should run. When it doesn't, they don't know how to process it. She developed psychological warfare protocols, ways to make the Krauth doubt themselves, ways to exploit their predator instincts against them. It wasn't traditional warfare, but nothing about this situation was traditional. Admiral Kevin Price took command of Earth's defense fleet. He was an old man, weathered by years in space, but his mind was sharp as ever. He had 80 ships, compared to the 200 that intelligence suggested the Krauth would send. We can't win by destroying them, he told his captains. We win by not losing. Every day we survive is a victory. Every ship they send home for repairs is a victory. We don't need to kill them. We need to outlast them. Training camps opened across Earth. Volunteers flooded in by the millions. Sergeant Lisa Moore ran the most intense program. She was a veteran of Earth's corporate wars, hard as nails and twice as sharp. You're going to learn to fight in zero gravity, she told her recruits. You're going to learn to fight in toxic atmospheres. You're going to learn to fight when you're exhausted, when you're scared, when every instinct tells you to quit. Because that's when the Krauth will expect you to break, and you're not going to break. She pushed them to their limits and then passed them. 40-hour training exercises with no sleep. Combat drills in environmental suits. Lessons on how to keep fighting when your weapons were gone. When your armor was breached, when you were the last one standing. The Krauth think we're weak, she would shout during exercises. They think we'll fold. They think we're prey. Show me you're not prey. Show me you're something they've never seen before. Sophie Blake finished her first batch of marathon suits on the 8th day. They were powered exoskeletons, but not like anything that had come before. They didn't make soldiers stronger. They made them tireless. A soldier in a marathon suit could fight for 72 hours straight without rest. The Krauth can hit harder, Sophie explained to General Bennett. They're faster in short bursts. But they tire. Everything tires eventually. Except humans in these suits. On the 10th day, the Wanderer detected the Krauth fleet entering the solar system. 200 ships, just as expected. War Master Krexthor commanded them, a legendary Vrax who had conquered 47 systems. His message to Earth was simple and arrogant. Prey of Earth, your time has ended. Surrender now, and you will serve. Resist, and you will be consumed. This is the way of the galaxy. This is the way it has always been. President Carter responded with a message of her own. It was broadcast across every frequency, sent to every Krauth ship, translated into their language. War Master Krexthor, you called us prey. You looked at our bodies and thought you understood us. You were wrong. We are humans. We don't surrender. We don't submit. And we don't stop. You wanted to hunt us. Now you're going to learn what it means to be hunted by something that never gives up. The Krauth fleet accelerated toward Earth. They expected a quick battle, a rapid victory, and an easy conquest. They were about to learn that humans had been underestimated before, by cave bears and saber-toothed cats, by mammoths and dire wolves, by every predator that thought humans were easy prey. None of those predators existed anymore. Admiral Price stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the Krauth fleet approach on his screens. His orders were simple. Don't engage at the system's edge. Draw them in. Make them chase. Make them commit. Make them tired, all ships, he said calmly. Begin Operation Marathon. Let them think they're winning. Let them think we're running scared. And then teach them that sometimes prey has teeth. The human fleet began to move, not away from Earth, but deeper into the solar system. The Krauth followed, confident and eager. They had hunted prey across 1,000 worlds. These humans would be no different. They were very, very wrong. Across Earth, soldiers in marathon suits stood ready. Engineers prepared backup systems and redundant equipment. Pilots climbed into ships designed to never stop fighting. Scientists activated psychological warfare programs. And 7 billion humans watched their leaders face down an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. The Krauth had called them prey. Now humanity was going to show the galaxy what happens when you mistake endurance for weakness, when you mistake determination for submission, when you mistake humans for anything other than what they really were. The most dangerous persistence predators the universe had ever created. The first engagement happened near Jupiter's orbit. War Master Krexthor positioned his fleet in a formation that had worked on 47 previous conquests. A wall of heavy warships in front, fast attack vessels on the flanks, support ships in the rear. It was textbook Krauth strategy. Overwhelming force applied at a single point. Admiral Kevin Price watched from the bridge of the Defiant. The Krauth formation was exactly what his analysts had predicted. Powerful, intimidating, and completely wrong for fighting humans. All ships, execute scatter pattern Delta, Price ordered calmly. The human fleet broke apart like a flock of birds startled by a hawk. 80 ships suddenly became 80 individual targets, each moving in a different direction. The Krauth formation, designed to crush a unified defense, suddenly had nothing to crush. War Master Krexthor felt the first stirring of confusion. Prey was supposed to huddle together for protection. These humans were spreading out, making themselves harder to defend. It was tactically foolish. He ordered his fleet to divide and pursue. That was his first mistake. Captain Megan Torres commanded the corvette Phoenix, a small ship with a crew of only 15. Her orders were simple: annoy the enemy. She brought her ship in close to a Krauth dreadnought, so close that the bigger ship's main guns couldn't target her without hitting its own hull. The Phoenix fired its weapons at the dreadnought's sensor arrays, not trying to destroy the ship, just blind it. The Krauth vessel tried to swat the Phoenix away like a human would swat a mosquito, but the Phoenix was fast and Megan was a better pilot than the Krauth expected. They're getting frustrated. her tactical officer reported with a grin. 3 ships are breaking formation to chase us. Good, Megan said. Let's give them a workout. She led the 3 Kralth ships on a chase through Jupiter's moon system. Every time they got close, she would dodge around a moon or dive into a debris field. The Kralth ships were bigger and more powerful, but they weren't built for this kind of flying. After 2 hours, one of the Kralth ships clipped an asteroid and had to withdraw for repairs. The Phoenix had barely been scratched. This same scene played out across the battle space. Small human ships darted between the massive Kralth vessels, firing quickly and moving on. They weren't trying to destroy the enemy fleet. They were trying to frustrate it, tire it, make it chase. Lieutenant Jake Hammond flew a fighter called Ghost 7. Fighters were considered obsolete in modern space warfare. Too small to carry effective weapons. Too fragile to survive in battle. But Jake wasn't trying to survive a short battle. He was trying to survive a long one. His fighter was fast and highly maneuverable. He would dart in, fire at a Kralth ship's communications array or weapon system, and dart away before they could respond. He wasn't doing major damage, but he was being annoying, very annoying. After 4 hours of this, Jake noticed something interesting. The Kralth ships were firing less frequently. Their response times were getting slower. He reported this to Admiral Price. They're getting tired, Price said with satisfaction. Their crews aren't used to extended combat. Keep the pressure on. The battle stretched into its second day. War Master Krexthor was becoming increasingly frustrated. His fleet had superior firepower, superior armor, and superior numbers. But they couldn't land a decisive blow. The humans refused to stand and fight. They kept moving, kept attacking, kept retreating before the Kralth could concentrate their forces. On the Defiant, Admiral Price rotated his crews in shifts. While half the crew rested, the other half fought. The Kralth didn't have this luxury. Their military doctrine called for short, intense battles. They didn't have the systems or training for extended combat. Sophie Blake's engineering became crucial on the 3rd day. Several human ships had taken heavy damage. Under normal circumstances, they would have had to withdraw completely. But the Endurance-class vessels could repair themselves while still fighting. The destroyer. Relentless took a direct hit that would have crippled a traditional warship. Its crew sealed the damaged sections, rerouted power through backup systems, and kept fighting. The Kralth ship that had damaged it expected the Relentless to retreat. Instead, the Relentless came back for another attack an hour later. This broke something in the Kralth psychology. Prey was supposed to run when injured. The Relentless was acting like a predator. Dr. Nicole Sanders watched the battle from Earth and activated her psychological warfare protocols. The Dread broadcast began transmitting on all Kralth frequencies. It wasn't a message. It was just sounds. Human footsteps. Human breathing. Human heartbeats. The sounds were steady, rhythmic, never stopping. The Kralth crews began to hear these sounds over their ship's communications. At first they ignored it, but as the battle stretched on, as they grew more tired, the sounds began to affect them. They were predator species. They understood the sounds of prey running, prey hiding, prey dying, but these sounds weren't those things. These were the sounds of something that kept coming. On the 4th day, War Master Krexthor made a decision. He would concentrate his entire fleet against a single human ship and destroy it completely. Show these prey creatures what happened when they resisted. He chose the carrier Defiant as his target. Admiral Price saw the Kralth fleet converging on his position. This was the moment Colonel Foster's tactics were designed for. Instead of running, Price ordered his entire fleet to converge on the Kralth fleet. If Krexthor wanted a decisive battle, he would get one, but not the kind he expected. The human ships didn't try to destroy the Kralth vessels. They tried to disable them. Target the engines, not the hull. Target the weapons, not the crew quarters. Target the communications, not the command deck. Make the ships unable to fight without destroying them. A disabled ship was better than a destroyed ship for the human strategy. A destroyed ship was gone. A disabled ship had to be protected, had to be towed, had to be repaired. It became a burden on the fleet. After 6 hours of intense combat, the Kralth fleet had destroyed 4 human ships. But 15 Kralth vessels were disabled and floating helplessly. War Master Krexthor had to detail ships to protect them, ships that couldn't participate in combat. Megan Torres and the Phoenix were in the thick of the fighting. Her ship had taken 17 hits. The hull was breached in 4 places. The main engine was running at 60% capacity. But the Phoenix kept fighting. Her crew worked in rotation, constantly repairing damage, constantly keeping the ship operational. "Captain," her engineer reported, "we're at 40% functionality. We should withdraw." Megan checked her screens. Around her, other human ships were in similar condition, but they were all still fighting. She thought about the Krauth transmission, about being called prey, about being told humans would submit or die. "We withdraw when the Admiral orders it," she said. "Until then, find me another target." Jake Hammond's fighter had been hit twice. His left engine was gone and his weapons were at half power, but he was still flying, still fighting. He saw a Krauth destroyer trying to line up a shot on a damaged human frigate. He pushed his fighter into a dive, firing his remaining weapons at the destroyer's sensor array. The destroyer turned its attention to Jake. For a moment, he thought he had made a fatal mistake. Then the human frigate, given time to maneuver, fired a spread of missiles that crippled the destroyer's engines. Jake pulled away, breathing hard. On the 5th day, something changed in the Krauth fleet. War Master Krexthor sent a transmission to Admiral Price. It wasn't a demand for surrender. It was a request to talk. Price considered refusing. But he was a practical man and his fleet was hurting. He agreed to a 1-hour ceasefire. Krexthor's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired. Predators weren't supposed to look tired, but he did. "Admiral Price, your tactics are unusual. You fight like no prey species we have encountered." "That's because we're not prey," Price said simply. "You made an assumption based on our biology." "You were wrong." "Perhaps," Krexthor admitted. "But you cannot win. We have more ships, more resources. Eventually you will be defeated." Price smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Maybe eventually, but how long will it take? How many of your ships will be damaged or destroyed? How tired will your crews be? How much will it cost your empire to defeat one prey species?" He leaned forward. "Because we're not stopping, War Master. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. You can defeat us eventually, but we're going to make you pay for every inch." The ceasefire ended. The battle resumed, but something had changed. The Krauth attacks were less aggressive, more cautious. They were starting to understand that this prey fought differently. On the 6th day, Jake Hammond made a crucial discovery. He noticed that after the Krauth ships fired their main weapons, there was a 40-minute period where their sensors were degraded. He reported this to Admiral Price immediately. Price spread this information across the fleet. Human ships began timing their attacks to these vulnerable periods. The Krauth didn't notice at first, but the humans were landing more effective hits. By the 7th day, War Master Krexthor's fleet had lost 32 ships. Not destroyed, but damaged enough that they had to withdraw for repairs. The human fleet had lost 18 ships destroyed, but every remaining human vessel was still fighting. Krexthor made the hardest decision of his career. He ordered a tactical withdrawal. The victory at Earth changed everything. News of the battle spread through the Krauth Empire's communication networks like wildfire. For the first time in 10,000 years, a prey species had not only resisted but had actually driven back the Krauth fleet. Across hundreds of worlds, enslaved species began to whisper. If the humans could fight back, maybe they could too. President Helen Carter called an emergency session of the United Earth Council 3 days after the battle. The damage reports were still coming in. 18 ships destroyed, thousands of casualties, orbital installations damaged. But humanity had survived, and that changed the equation. "The Krauth will come back," General Chris Bennett said. He stood at the head of the table, looking tired but determined. "They can't let this defeat stand. If they do, their entire empire will start to crumble. Next time they'll come with more ships better prepared. So we don't wait for them to come back," President Carter said. "We take the fight to them." The room went silent. Admiral Kevin Price leaned forward. "Madame President, we barely survived one battle. You're suggesting we invade Krauth space?" "Not invade," Carter corrected. "Disrupt. Inspire. Show every enslaved species in the galaxy that the Krauth can be beaten." She looked at Jake Morrison, who had been promoted to Commodore after the battle. "Commodore Morrison, you made first contact. What do you know about the Krauth Empire's structure?" Jake pulled up a holographic map of known Krauth space. "From what we gathered, the Empire controls about 2,000 systems. They maintain control through fear and military superiority. But they're stretched thin. They never needed large garrisons because no one ever rebelled successfully." Colonel Ryan Foster added his analysis. "Their supply lines are vulnerable. They rely on automated supply ships moving between systems. If we disrupt those lines, we force them to divert military ships to protect convoys. Ships they can't use to attack Earth. Dr. Nicole Sanders spoke up from her seat. There's another factor, psychology. The Krauth Empire is built on the belief that predators always dominate prey. We've shaken that belief. If we can contact enslaved species and show them our victory, we might spark rebellions across their territory. President Carter nodded. Then that's what we do. General Bennett, I want strike forces ready to hit Krauth supply lines within 2 weeks. Commodore Morrison, I want you to lead a diplomatic mission to contact enslaved species. Dr. Sanders, you're going with him. Jake Morrison assembled a task force of 20 ships, not the largest vessels but fast ones, ships that could strike quickly and disappear before the Krauth could respond. The flagship was still the Wanderer, now retrofitted with better weapons and defenses. Amy Chen was back at the pilot station. She had survived the Battle of Earth, though her previous ship had been destroyed under her. Dr. Peter Hayes was also back, along with Marcus Webb and Linda Grant. They were the original first contact crew, and they would be the first to reach out to the enslaved species. The journey to Thexal Prime took 6 weeks. They traveled through unmapped space, avoiding known Krauth patrol routes. Intelligence suggested the Thexal were an insectoid species that had been conquered 300 years ago. They were used primarily as industrial labor, working in factories that produced equipment for the Krauth military. Why the Thexal? Amy asked during one of the planning sessions. Because they have a history of resistance, Jake explained. According to the data we captured from the Krauth, there have been 17 Thexal uprisings in the past 3 centuries. All were crushed, but it means they haven't given up. They're still fighting. When they reached Thexal Prime, Jake saw a world stripped bare. The surface was covered in factories and mining operations. The sky was brown with pollution. Orbital scans showed millions of Thexal working in conditions that would kill humans in days. Linda Grant searched through old communication frequencies, looking for any sign of Thexal resistance. After 3 days, she found something. A coded message repeating every 6 hours. It was in an ancient Thexal dialect, pre-conquest language. It's a marker, Linda said, like a lighthouse. It's telling other resistance members where to find them. Jake authorized a response. A single message on the same frequency. We are human. We were called prey. We're here to teach you how prey becomes predator. The response came 4 hours later. A location. Coordinates on the planet's surface in an abandoned industrial sector. Jake took a small team down. Marcus Webb insisted on heavy security, but Jake knew they had to show trust. The Thexal who met them was called Vexic. He was old by Thexal standards, his carapace scarred from decades of fighting. He looked at the humans with compound eyes that showed deep suspicion. You say you are prey? Vexic clicked in translated speech. The Krauth classify all Thexal as prey. We have been slaves for 300 years. What makes you different? Jake played a recording of the Battle of Earth. The Thexal watched in silence as human ships fought the Krauth fleet for 7 days. When it ended, Vexic's antenna twitched in what might have been surprise. You survived, he said simply. You fought the Krauth fleet and survived. In 300 years, no one has done this. We did more than survive, Dr. Sanders added. We made them retreat, and we're here to show you how to do the same. Vexic looked at his fellow resistance fighters. There were perhaps 20 of them, a pathetically small force against Krauth occupation, but Jake could see something in their posture. Hope. After 3 centuries of hopelessness, they were seeing hope. The garrison has 200 Krauth soldiers, Vexic said. We have weapons, but they are old. We have fighters, but most are untrained. We have tried 17 times to free our world. 17 times we have failed. Because you tried to fight them like they fight, Jake said. Quick attacks. Overwhelming force. You can't beat the Krauth at their own game. You have to change the game. He spent the next week training the Thexal resistance, not in Krauth tactics but in human tactics. Persistence, adaptation, never stopping. The Thexal were naturally equipped for this kind of warfare. Their exoskeletons made them durable. Their compound eyes gave them excellent awareness. They just needed to learn to use these advantages. Colonel Foster arrived with supplies and better weapons. Not Krauth technology, but human designs adapted for Thexal physiology. Weapons that were reliable, easy to repair, and designed for long engagements rather than quick kills. The attack on the garrison was planned for the night cycle. The Krauth had occupied Thexel Prime for so long they had become complacent. The garrison was strong enough to crush any conventional attack, but the attack that came wasn't conventional. It started with the factories. Thexel workers, coordinated by resistance fighters, began sabotaging production lines. Nothing obvious. Just small delays, minor defects, equipment that broke down more frequently. The Krauth noticed something was wrong but couldn't identify the problem. Then the real attack began. Human soldiers in marathon suits and Thexel fighters hit the garrison from 4 directions simultaneously. The Krauth responded exactly as expected. They concentrated their forces at the main gate, preparing for a direct assault. But the attack at the main gate was a feint. The real assault came from underground. The Thexel had been digging tunnels for decades, hiding them from Krauth scanners. Human engineers had helped them expand these tunnels into a network that reached under the garrison walls. The combined force came up inside the garrison. The Krauth found themselves fighting in close quarters where their size was a disadvantage. The battle lasted 14 hours. Every time the Krauth thought they had repelled an attack, it resumed from a different direction. Marcus Webb led one of the human teams. His squad of 10 soldiers fought alongside 50 Thexel warriors. They moved through the garrison methodically, not trying to kill every Krauth soldier but to make them exhausted, frustrated, and demoralized. "They're not expecting this," Marcus reported to Jake. "They keep trying to form defensive positions, but we don't give them time to rest." By dawn, the Krauth garrison had lost 20% of its forces and most of its ammunition. The commander sent a message requesting reinforcement. But Jake had anticipated this. Human ships in orbit jammed the communication before it could reach other Krauth forces. The garrison commander, a Vrax named Korthal, finally understood his position. He was cut off, outnumbered, and fighting an enemy that wouldn't stop. He did something no Krauth commander had done in living memory. He surrendered. News of the Thexel liberation spread rapidly. Within days, 5 other enslaved species attempted uprisings. The Krauth scrambled to respond, pulling ships from frontier systems to reinforce occupied worlds. This created exactly the opportunity human strategists had planned for. Admiral Price launched Operation Persistence. Human strike forces hit 6 Krauth supply depots simultaneously. These weren't major battles, just quick raids. Destroy supplies, sabotage equipment, and leave before reinforcements arrived. Each raid forced the Krauth to divert more resources to defending their supply lines. Sophie Blake developed a new tactic for these raids. Her engineering teams would leave behind small devices that broadcast human signals. Heartbeats, footsteps, breathing. The psychological warfare continued even after human forces had withdrawn. Krauth crews at these depots began hearing these sounds, began feeling watched. 8 months after the Battle of Earth, the Krauth Empire was unrecognizable. 42 species had declared independence. 17 more were in active rebellion. The empire that had dominated the galaxy for 10,000 years was collapsing from within. And the cause was a single prey species that refused to accept its place. The Vrax High Command met an emergency session on their homeworld. Elder Vrax Thexurl called the meeting to order. He was ancient even by Vrax standards, having lived through 3 centuries of conquest and expansion. He had seen the Empire at its peak. Now he was watching it crumble. War Master Krexthor stood before the council, his scales dulled from stress and exhaustion. He had fought the humans for months and every victory felt like a defeat. The human forces continue to strike our supply lines. We cannot defend everything simultaneously. Every time we commit forces to one sector, they attack another. Then commit more forces, Council Member Vexmort growled. He was younger, aggressive, and unwilling to accept that prey could threaten the Empire. Exterminate them. Make an example of Earth. Show the galaxy what happens to prey that resists. Krexthor shook his head slowly. We tried that at Earth. We sent 200 ships. We lost. Not because they were stronger, but because they would not stop fighting. Even when we damaged their vessels, they continued. Even when we killed their warriors, more came. They are unlike any prey we have encountered. Elder Thexurl had been silent, but now he spoke. His voice was quiet, but carried authority. We made a fundamental error. We classified the humans based on their physical characteristics. We saw weak bodies and assumed weak spirits. We saw prey biology and assumed prey behavior. We were wrong. They are still prey, Vexmort insisted. Their bodies prove it. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no speed. They are designed to be eaten. No, Thexerl said firmly. They are designed to never stop. We are ambush predators. We strike hard and fast, then rest. The humans are persistence predators. They pursue their prey until it collapses from exhaustion. They have turned this strategy against us. We cannot rest while they continue to fight. The council chamber fell silent. The idea that prey could be more dangerous than predators went against everything the Kralth believed. But the evidence was undeniable. The Empire was losing. What do you suggest? Krexthor asked the Elder. Thexerl stood, moving to a star map that showed the Empire. Red markers indicated rebellious worlds. There were dozens of them now, spreading like an infection. We negotiate. We acknowledge the humans as equals. We offer peace. Half the council erupted in protest. Negotiate with prey? Impossible. Unthinkable. Against every principle the Empire was built on, but Thexerl waited for the noise to die down. The alternative is the collapse of the Empire, he said simply. The humans have shown enslaved species that resistance is possible. Every day we fight them, more species rebel. If we continue this war, we will spend centuries crushing rebellions one by one, bleeding resources until we have nothing left. Or we can adapt to prey? Vexmort spat the words like poison. Adapt to reality, Thexerl corrected. The humans have already won, not through military victory, but by changing what the galaxy believes. They proved that prey classification means nothing. That determination matters more than physical strength. That beings who refuse to quit are more dangerous than beings who possess natural weapons. After 3 days of debate, the council reached a decision. They would request negotiations. It was the first time in recorded history that the Kralth Empire had sued for peace with a prey species. The message reached Earth within hours. President Helen Carter read it carefully. The Kralth wanted to meet on neutral ground, at a station called Crossroads near the border of their territory. They would send Elder Thexerl and War Master Krexthor. Carter assembled her team. She would lead the negotiations personally. Commodore Jake Morrison would join her, along with Dr. Nicole Sanders and General Chris Bennett. Admiral Kevin Price would command a fleet nearby, just in case the Kralth had hostile intentions. The journey to Crossroads took 3 weeks. The station was ancient, built by a species that no longer existed. It had been used for diplomatic meetings for thousands of years. Now it would host the most important negotiation in galactic history. Jake Morrison walked through the station's corridors, studying the architecture. The beings who built this place believed in neutral ground, in peaceful resolution of conflicts. He hoped that belief would hold. Elder Thexerl arrived first with a small escort. War Master Krexthor came with him. The Vrax looked different somehow, less confident. The predator arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been respect. The two groups met in a circular chamber designed for diplomacy. No weapons were allowed. No guards except those at the door. Just leaders facing each other across a table. President Carter spoke first. Elder Thexerl, War Master Krexthor, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Thexerl inclined his head. President Carter, I must begin with an acknowledgement. The Kralth Empire made an error in judgment regarding humanity. We classified you as prey based on incomplete analysis. We were wrong. The words hung in the air. A Vrax Elder, representative of the apex predator species, admitting error to prey. It was unprecedented. We accept your acknowledgement, Carter said carefully. But acknowledgement alone is not enough. 42 species have already gained independence from your empire. More are fighting for it. What are you offering? War Master Krexthor answered. We offer peace with humanity. A treaty recognizing your sovereignty and your right to exist without interference. We also offer access to Kralth technology and trade networks. And the enslaved species? Jake Morrison asked. What happens to them? Silence. This was the critical question. The Kralth Empire's power came from its enslaved populations. Releasing them would mean the end of the empire as it existed. Elder Thexerl spoke slowly, as if each word cost him something. We cannot release all enslaved species immediately. The empire would collapse into chaos, but we can offer a path to autonomy. Species that prove they can govern themselves will be released from direct control. The process will take time. How much time? General Bennett asked skeptically. Decades, Thexerl admitted. Perhaps centuries for some species. But it will happen. The alternative is continued warfare, and the eventual destruction of both the Empire and the rebellious species. Dr. Nicole Sanders leaned forward. You're asking us to accept gradual freedom instead of immediate liberation. Why would we agree to that? Because immediate liberation would cause more suffering than gradual transition, Thexerl said. Many enslaved species have no infrastructure for self-governance, no economy independent of the Empire, no military to defend themselves. Release them all at once and they will be vulnerable to exploitation by other powers, or will descend into civil war. Carter considered this. It was a practical argument, but it also felt like an excuse. What guarantees do we have that you'll follow through? That this isn't just a delay tactic while you rebuild your forces. You have the galaxy as witness, Thexerl said. We propose a galactic assembly. Every species, whether predator or prey, whether strong or weak, will have a voice. The assembly will oversee the transition process and ensure we honor our commitments. A galactic assembly where prey species have equal voices with predator species, Jake Morrison asked. You're proposing to overturn 10,000 years of galactic order. Yes, Thexerl said simply. Because the old order is dead. Your species killed it. The belief that predators must dominate prey is no longer sustainable. You proved that persistence matters more than physical strength. That determination matters more than natural weapons. That prey classification is meaningless when the prey refuses to act like prey. Carter looked at her advisors. This was the moment. Accept the Krauth offer and risk that they would betray it later. Or refuse and continue a war that was causing suffering across the galaxy. We need time to consider, Carter said, and we need input from the species currently fighting for their freedom. This decision affects them as much as it affects us. The negotiations paused while humanity contacted the various resistance movements. Bexik of the Thexel, Coralin of the Mevery, Tixel of the Gorath, leaders of species who had fought the Krauth for decades or centuries. Their input would decide humanity's response. The response was mixed. Some wanted immediate independence, consequences be damned. Others saw the wisdom in a gradual transition. All agreed on one thing. They wanted guarantees. Real enforceable guarantees that the Krauth would honor the agreement. Jake Morrison proposed a solution. Human forces would remain in Krauth space as peacekeepers, not as occupiers but as neutral observers ensuring the transition proceeded as promised. If the Krauth violated the agreement, humanity would resume supporting rebellions. Elder Thexerl agreed to this condition. The alternative was continued warfare and the Krauth were already exhausted. The agreement was drafted over 2 weeks of intense negotiation. The Galactic Assembly would be established within 1 year. Enslaved species would receive a timeline for autonomy, supervised by the Assembly. Human forces would maintain a presence in former Krauth space for at least a decade. When the treaty was finally signed, it marked the end of one era, and 2 years after first contact, the galaxy was transformed. Commodore Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Wanderer, watching the construction of Unity Station. It would be the home of the Galactic Assembly, a massive structure built by 53 different species working together. It was something that would have been impossible just 2 years ago. Amy Chen joined him at the viewport. She had been promoted to captain and now commanded her own ship, but she had returned to the Wanderer for the Assembly's opening session. Hard to believe this is real, she said. 2 years ago we were running for our lives, now we're building a government for the entire galaxy. Not a government, Jake corrected. More like a forum, a place where species can talk instead of fight, where prey and predator classifications don't matter anymore. Dr. Peter Hayes walked up with a data pad, reviewing his notes for the upcoming scientific exchange. The assembly wasn't just about politics. It was about sharing knowledge, technology, and culture. I've been analyzing the biology of the different species, he said. It's fascinating. The Krauth were right that humans have prey characteristics, but they missed the important ones. Our ability to sweat, our efficient cooling system, our ability to maintain activity for hours without rest. These aren't weaknesses, they're weapons. Marcus Webb arrived next, looking uncomfortable in his formal uniform. The security officer had spent the past year training mixed-species security forces for the assembly. The Thexal are natural at close combat, he reported. The Gorath are excellent scouts. The reformed Krauth bring heavy firepower. Combine them with human persistence and tactical thinking, and we've got a security force that can handle any threat. Linda Grant was the last to arrive. She had been working on the universal translation system that would allow all assembly species to communicate without confusion. The linguistics are incredible, she said. 53 different languages, some verbal, some chemical, some based on color changes. But we've found common ground. Every species has concepts for cooperation, fairness, and mutual benefit. The Krauth just forgot about those concepts for a few thousand years. President Helen Carter's shuttle docked an hour later. She would give the opening address at the Assembly's first session. Jake met her at the airlock. "Nervous?" he asked. Carter smiled. "Terrified. I'm about to address species that have been spacefaring for thousands of years longer than humanity. Some of them remember when humans were still living in caves. But none of them did what we did," Jake pointed out. "None of them stood up to the Krauth and won. That gives your words weight." The assembly chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate species of vastly different sizes and environmental needs. The Vrax delegation sat in reinforced seating designed for their massive frames. The Thexel occupied a section with higher oxygen content. The Mavari, an aquatic species, attended via holographic projection from water-filled pods. Elder Thexerl called the session to order. His voice, translated into 53 languages simultaneously, filled the chamber. "We gather today to create something unprecedented. A galaxy where cooperation replaces conquest. Where all species, regardless of their classification or military strength, have an equal voice in shaping our shared future." He paused, his yellow eyes scanning the chamber. This assembly exists because one species refused to accept the role assigned to them. When the Krauth Empire classified humans as prey, they resisted, they fought, they persisted, and they taught us all that the categories we used to order the galaxy were meaningless. Thexerl gestured to President Carter. "I invite President Helen Carter of humanity to address the assembly." Carter stood and walked to the central platform. She looked small compared to many of the species present, but her voice carried confidence. 2 years ago, humanity made first contact with the galaxy. We were classified as Class 7 prey. We were told we had 2 choices: submit to slavery or face extinction. She paused, letting the words sink in. We chose a third option. We chose to fight. Not because we wanted war, but because we refused to accept that our biology determined our destiny. We showed the galaxy that strength isn't about physical power. It's about determination. It's about persistence. It's about refusing to quit when every rational analysis says you should. She looked directly at the Vrax delegation. The Krauth Empire made an error. They saw our bodies and thought they understood us. They didn't. Because humans aren't defined by what we look like. We're defined by what we do when faced with impossible odds. We're defined by our refusal to accept defeat. Carter's voice grew stronger. But we didn't fight this war alone. The Thexel, who had resisted for 300 years, fought beside us. The Gorath, who never stopped hoping for freedom, fought beside us. Dozens of species who were told they were prey showed the galaxy that they were warriors. She turned to address the full assembly. This chamber represents a new way forward. Not predator and prey, not strong and weak. Just species working together for mutual benefit. Some of you are skeptical. You think this idealism can't last. That eventually the strong will dominate the weak again because that's the natural order. Carter smiled. But humans proved there is no natural order. There's only what we choose to accept. If we accept domination, we get empires. If we accept cooperation, we get progress. The choice is ours. She returned to her seat to a mix of reactions. Some species applauded. Others remained silent, still uncertain. But all of them were thinking. That was enough. The Assembly's first order of business was establishing the transition timeline. Elder Thexerl presented the Krauth proposal. Species would be evaluated based on their ability to self-govern, defend themselves, and maintain stable societies. Those that met the criteria would receive independence within 5 years. Others would have longer timelines but with regular reviews. Vexic of the Thexal stood to speak. The insectoid's translator conveyed his words with pride. My people have waited 300 years for freedom. 5 more years is acceptable if it means true independence rather than chaos, but we demand guarantees. Human observers. Regular inspections. Consequences if the Krauth fail to honor their commitments. The proposal passed with modifications. Human peacekeeping forces would remain in former Krauth territory for at least 10 years. The Assembly would have the authority to intervene if any species violated the agreement. And most importantly, the Assembly itself would have enforcement power. It wouldn't just be a forum for discussion, it would have teeth. During a break in the proceedings, Jake Morrison found himself in conversation with War Master Krexthor. The Varax commander looked different now, less aggressive, more thoughtful. "I wanted to kill you," Krexthor admitted. "When you first came to our ships, when you dared to speak to us as equals, I wanted to crush you and your entire species." "What changed?" Jake asked. "You didn't break," Krexthor said simply. "We fought you for 7 days at Earth. You should have broken after the first day. Every military doctrine, every historical precedent said you would break. But you didn't. You just kept fighting, and I realized that I didn't understand what I was facing." He looked at his clawed hands. "I was raised to believe that these made me superior, that physical strength determined worth. You taught me that I was wrong. Persistence is stronger than strength. Determination is more valuable than natural weapons. Will is more powerful than muscle." "Will you help?" Jake asked. "Help build this new galaxy? We need species with your experience and knowledge." Krexthor nodded slowly. "I will try. It goes against everything I was taught. But perhaps that's why it's necessary. The old teachings created an empire built on oppression. New teachings might create something better." Sophie Blake presented her proposals for shared technology development. She had been working with engineers from multiple species, combining human endurance technology with Thexel industrial capacity, and reformed Krauth heavy engineering. "Together we can build things none of us could build alone," she explained. "Ships that combine human persistent systems with Krauth power cores and Thexel manufacturing precision." The Assembly approved funding for joint research stations. Within months, these stations would be producing hybrid technologies that advanced every participating species. Dr. Nicole Sanders organized the first cross-species cultural exchange. Understanding between species required more than just political agreements. It required genuine knowledge of each other's histories, values, and perspectives. She arranged for human artists, musicians, and philosophers to meet with their counterparts from dozens of worlds. "The Krauth wrote poetry," she told Jake one evening. "Beautiful poetry about the hunt, about the pursuit, about the chase. When I showed them human poetry about persistence, about marathon running, about never giving up, they understood. We're not so different. We just express the same drives in different ways." 6 months after the Assembly's founding, the first crisis occurred. A rogue Krauth faction attacked a Mavari colony ship. They killed 47 civilians before fleeing into deep space. The Assembly faced its first real test. Could it respond effectively, or would it collapse into the same violence that had defined the galaxy for millennia? President Carter called an emergency session. The Mavari demanded justice. Some species called for military retaliation, others urged,